guys, it's Sophie, and today I wanted to talk to you about book ratings. So probably as a lot of you do, I tend to rate my books on Goodreads immediately after reading them. And I sort of pop them on as I go along, and I don't really think about it too much. I sort of think, I enjoyed that book, I gave it a rating, next. And because I read so much, I do find myself rating a book and moving straight on. I know some of you guys are probably a bit more sensible with your ratings and you might wait for it to sink in a bit, but that's something I've not really done yet. So first of all, I'm going to go through my numbers. So these stats are taken from the spreadsheet, the 2015 reading stats by Let's Read. Profile link down below and the videos link there too if you want to use it. I have just recently started using it, but I found it really useful for the time I have been using it. So, according to these statistics, I have rated 17 of my books as 5 stars, 23 of my books as 4 stars, 13 books as 3 stars, 3 of my books as 2 stars, and 3 of my books as 1 stars. So, as you can see, there's a bit of an imbalance there really, isn't there? Because really, of all the books I'm reading, 4 or 5 stars? Probably not. Probably not. So I'm going to talk about why, and I'm going to talk about how I want to change this. So I think a big part of it is what I mentioned earlier, is the fact that Goodreads prompts you to rate your book as soon as you finish reading it. And what that means is often you don't think of it in the context of the other books you've read, and you aren't thinking about it in terms of the context of sort of the books that are out there, and you're rating it purely on that one experience you've had, and normally the experience you've had toward the end of the book. It's a very immediate system. It requires you to sort of think very quickly, quite literally. I use it on my phone a lot. I'm finished, how many stars? There's not a lot of thought process that goes in, and it's part of the process by which you mark it as read. And for me, when I finish a book, a big part of it is marking it as read and taking it off my TBR. I find quite a lot of satisfaction from being able to do that. So as a result, I'm too lenient with my reviews. I want to be seeing, ideally, and if I'm reading amazing books, then by all means I'm not going to just downgrade them just for the sake of ratios, but I want to be seeing the majority of my books as 3s, if that makes sense. Because for me, that shows that the books I'm reading, the average rating I'm giving is a 3. Let me explain that a little bit more. So for me, when you have a rating on a scale of 1 to 5, what you're really saying is number 1 are going to be the worst books that you're going to read, and number 5 are going to be the best. So, by law of averages, 3, the 3-star rating, should be the average of the books that you give. My rating on average, I think, is 3.81, which is high. It means I'm giving more books, 4s and 5s, than perhaps I should be doing if I'm rating my reading in that way. You might not want to do it like this. This is purely my own personal way of sort of rating and wanting to know that I'm giving books a rating that I can look back on and I can actually compare the books that I've read to the books I've read in previous years and within that year. So my proposal to myself is that what I'm going to do is I am going to give it a rating as soon as I finish it. I'm going to click on that button on Goodreads and I'm going to give it a rating. But then I want to go back, and when I come to the point of wrap-up, which I'm planning to do weekly from now on because of how huge my April wrap-up was and it was just unmanageable, I couldn't talk about any of the books. But to go back at the end of each week and to look at them and to actually look at the rating again and to say, well, was it 5 stars? Was there some things you could have changed? Were there some things that annoyed you? Are you giving it 5 stars for one aspect of the book? So that's my next sort of point, is aspects, so the things I'm rating them on. So I'm going to take any one of my books from my shelf and I'm going to go through this with you so you understand sort of the way that I'm doing this. Okay, so the book I've chosen is Vicious by V.E. Schwab. Lots of people really enjoyed this book. I quite enjoyed this book. So I give this book a 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so that's in line with what a lot of people think. A lot of people think this is a 5 out of 5 star book. But looking back on it, I don't. And I'm going to explain the reasons for that. The reasons for the 5 star at the beginning, and the reasons why that rating in my mind has dropped now. The reasons I gave it a 5 star were because of the fact I thought the characters were very well done. I thought they were multifaceted, and I thought the storyline was interesting. I very much liked the age of the protagonists. I thought that was something that was sort of quite new, to see people in their early 20s who were, experiencing things you'd normally see in a YA book, where the protagonist might be slightly younger, and I found that quite refreshing. I also hadn't read anything by V.E. Schwab, and I did enjoy her writing style. I also felt as though a lot of people on BookTube had really enjoyed this book, and sort of swept up in that, I added my own feelings to that and felt as though I had really enjoyed this book. It was a good book, but now I look back on it, and I read this one in December. It's probably a 3-star book for me. Not because of the fact that there are any sort of aspects that jar or anything that was particularly bad, because a 3-star rating isn't a bad rating, in my opinion. A 3-star rating is a book that doesn't particularly stand out, maybe a 3.5 for this one. Because I know I have spoken about this with a few people and recommended it to a few people, so maybe I do enjoy it, slightly more than an average read. However, I don't think this is a book that has sort of changed me in any way, and I don't feel as though it's a book that is entirely unique. I don't feel as though it's a book that deserves that 5-star rating. I feel as though the characters, as I mentioned, were very well done. I feel as though the setting was quite vivid. What I didn't like particularly was the pacing of this storyline. I didn't particularly like some of the side characters either, and at times I felt as though we were asked to give a little bit too much emotion for those side characters when we hadn't actually been given as much of a background on them as I would have wanted. Mitch would be a really good example of this. So while we see him, in the prison with Eli, I wanted more about him. I wanted to know just a little bit more. And what I like ideally is when we have these side characters is to see sort of a few sentences that tend to sum them up. I'm not asking for paragraphs, I'm not asking for a side novel. What I'm asking for is just for that little bit more of personal information that would make me connect to that character a little more. And I didn't feel as though there was that. I know some people may feel differently, and that's absolutely your ability to feel differently. So Ready Player One by Ernest Cline was a book that I think thoroughly deserves a 5 out of 5 stars. And I read this in 2014, in February. So this is a fair old while away from this book, and yet it's holding on to that 5-star rating. So the reasons for that are because this was truly, it felt so original. It was a wonderful world building. The fact that they were able to combine the world, the upper world, the sort of reality, with the game world, to add in those aspects of, searching for things, the characters, friendships, that it was something so unique, and it was something that felt very modern and very interesting to me to see how multiplayer games, the ideas of what they could become. There's very much a Willy Wonka aspect to this as well, which a lot of people have said, and whilst I felt that it, pulled from that story, I didn't feel as though it was in any way a copy or in any way, stealing from that storyline. I did honestly feel as though it was something that was entirely unique. So this is a book, in my opinion, that retains that 5-star rating long after I've read it. It's a book that I want to reread, and that's something else that should come in a 5-star book. It should be a book you love so much that you can't wait to read it again. I read this twice. I finished this book and then I picked it up again because I loved it so much. And I'll reread it, and it thoroughly deserves the 5 stars. So my aim from now on is that I'm going to be trying to review books more honestly, and I'm going to be trying to actually analyse them and give it a bit of time to sink in. The first way in which I'm going to do this is I'm going to look back over the books I've read just in 2015. I'm not going to go back over the entirety of 2014, that seems a bit much. I'm going to go back over 2015, and I'm going to put the numbers in that I feel are correct now. And I'm hoping that my numbers are going to shift downwards more. And that's not in any way any insult to the books themselves or to the authors. It's a way of reviewing books that I feel will be able to make me more able to choose between the books that I loved, the books I liked, and the books I thought were okay. The 2-star and the 1-star essentially stay in the same camps. The 2-star was, I had significant issue with this book. I read it, there were enjoyable parts to it, and it wasn't entirely, horrendous. 1-star books are books that I wouldn't recommend to anyone. They're books that I would probably get rid of in time, and they're books that I just found nothing about it that I enjoyed. I really want to know how you guys rate and review your books, and if you've ever thought about going back over the reviews later in time. It's something I've not seen anyone talk about, but I may be closed, I may be entirely blinkered to what you're all doing. Yeah, so that's my plan from now on. I'm planning on doing a sort of quarterly maybe wrap up on my reading to give myself some ideas of the stats and to give you guys an idea of what I have read so far this year, and planning on doing that probably every single quarter of this year up until the final full year wrap up. I think it should be interesting, and hopefully I'll learn some more about my reading. I've learned an awful lot just about my ratings just by doing this video. Okay, thank you guys ever so much for watching. Hope you have a lovely day, night, evening, whatever it is you're having right now. Bye bye. Ready Player One. Ow. Liver bro, you're hurting me.